So a couple of weeks ago, something very interesting happened. I had a conversation with someone in De Beers about diamonds. And we put it up on our Instagram handle, and there was a long list of questions and issues and problems that our viewers had with diamonds in general. They had issues with whether or not they're ethically sourced, whether they're good for the environment. Is this a responsible conversation to be having? Should we be asking tougher questions? Now, here's what has happened. Taranj Mehta, who is the VP Marketing De Beers, who was with me in that conversation, was kind enough to turn around and say, you know what? We will come back and we will answer every single question in that comment section. And that's what we're doing today. So Taranj is from De Beers, India. She's a vice president marketing, and she's decided to answer all of your questions. I'm going to try and ask all the questions as well. So I first want to acknowledge the fact that in this collaborative conversation, that it is really admirable that you've decided to answer every single question, and I'm very excited about this opportunity in general. So we're going to try and ask everything we have as a list to begin with. And I think that the most the largest list that came up was about the idea of ethically sourced diamonds, because there have been reports, and there was a documentary film that everyone is referring to, which was called, I think, Nothing Lasts Forever, where it talked about that two major issues. It talked about the fact that the actual value is sort of hyped up from scarcity that doesn't exist, and that's being challenged by lab grown. And we'll come to the lab grown conversation. But I want to talk to you about ethically sourced diamonds and what that means. So when we say this diamond is ethically sourced, what does that mean?
Um, so, just to start off,
Yes.
thanks for having me here. And we thought it's very important that consumers don't have confusions in their mind.
Yes.
And that is why we thought it's really important to have this conversation with you. Um, Now, to come to the bit about ethical sourcing.
Yes.
So there is this whole concept of conflict diamonds, right? So, but which meant that diamonds were being used to finance civil war in certain countries. Uh, First point is that those civil wars have actually concluded 20 years ago. So there is the concept of conflict diamonds just now is almost zero. Second is
Except Democratic Republic of Congo is still in conflict.
yes,
That was one of those locations.
but it is those diamonds are not accepted anywhere because of the Kimberley process.
Okay.
So this is a process that is actually mandated by the UN, governments of different countries, as well as the miners. And about 70 countries are part of this process, which actually certifies that a diamond is ethically sourced from a country that is democratically representing and it is contributing to that country. So, for example, whenever you have rough diamonds coming into a country, say for example India, which cuts and polishes about 90% of the world's diamonds, when the rough diamond comes into the country, it is always accompanied by a Kimberley process certificate, which certifies that it is a conflict-free diamond. And this certificate, if it's not available with the diamond will not enter the country. So there is a very clear regulation that is available for the whole entire diamond industry to follow this protocol. Right now, as we speak, 99.8% of all natural diamonds in the world are conflict free. So that's a huge number. This kind of process that we've implemented, which is the Kimberley process, is one of the most regulated processes in any industry across the world.
Okay.
So it is not something that can be taken lightly because there is a lot of work that has happened to help build this.
Okay, so let me tell you what I've understood. You tell me if I'm correct.
Yes.
Okay. What they used to call blood diamonds, or basically conflict diamonds, came from areas like Sierra Leone, Angola, West Africa, Congo, where the money that came out of those diamonds were being used to fund conflict. They would buy guns, there would be war, and that would lead to a lot of suffering. What you're saying is the Kimberley process that since then has come in agreement of 70 countries across the world, has certificates to show that the diamond that in question has not come from one of those regions. It is not a conflict diamond. It is ethically sourced. And that is only how, say, a country like India will accept
Yes.
that diamond at all. And this happens at the mining and the rough diamond stage.
Rough stage. So once it is, so if the question doesn't arise, because it won't just come into the country to get polished and cut. So that's what I'm saying. 99.8% of all diamonds in the world are conflict free.
So as an Indian customer today, would it be fair to say that almost all diamonds that are sold in India right now are conflict free?
Yes, it would be, because if you go to a reputable jeweler in the country, they will always, the kind of sourcing that they will do will also be extremely extremely well drawn out. They would have standard operating procedures. For example, say a Tanishq or even a Malabar Gold, or say Senco. The kind of, if you have to work at such a large scale, you are not going to be able to do it without the proper
paperwork and the
proper
tracing
process
where your
yes.
yes
So-
come from.
And in fact, if we were to also take this one step further, De Beers themselves have, in addition to the Kimberley process, have the best practice protocols, which we
Okay.
call as BPPs,
Hmm.
which is another 300-step process that not only do we implement to ensure ethical sourcing, sustainability, as well as responsible work. So no child labor, no human rights violations, etc. And not only do we follow those BPP principles, but everyone who is associated with De Beers. So the De Beers site holders, their contractors, the contractors that those contractors work with, that entire pipeline is accountable for ethical sourcing of diamonds.
One of the challenges with mining has always been whether or not the workers are adequately paid and looked after. Um, with obviously the Kimberley standards are for how the diamonds are sourced, but what are you doing to make sure your workers are looked after?
As De Beers.
Yes.
So De Beers is a huge mining company,
Yes.
and in fact, we have standards, as I mentioned, the best practice protocols, which involve all of us as employees also. So it is not as though we can, just do whatever we like. And the Kimberley process also mandates certain things that we have to keep in mind for the mining of the product also, or the jewelry. Sorry, the diamonds. So it is not as though it's a free for all. There is, as I mentioned, the entire industry is extremely well regulated. So there are processes that you have to follow to ensure. In fact, there are things like safety.
Yes.
So to ensure that safety of all miners is primary. In fact, for all employees, not only the miners, but all employees and the contractors. So if there is some outsourcing work done, so safety of all of those is a key critical value for us in De Beers. And even if there is a minor injury in the company, across the company, wherever our operations are, there is a impact financially on everyone's bonuses. So it is not something that is taken lightly at all. In fact, last year was a very good year, because we had zero incidents.
Right.
So our first value that we have as a company in De Beers is put safety first.
So what is the size of De Beers in the diamonds mining industry right now?
So if we look at the whole diamond industry, we have about 25 to 30% of the market. So our market share is about 25-30%.
And what countries are you mining in?
We mine in Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Canada.
And so the Kimberley process that you were telling us about, that certification is for the mining up to the raw diamond reaching the cutting stage.
Rough diamond.
So basically the rough diamond, I'm sorry. So if as a customer I'm buying a diamond in a store, I can't see that certification. It doesn't come up till the customer stage, does it?
The Kimberley certificate does not, but there are things that we are putting in place now. As I mentioned, the Tracer blockchain program, which allows for you to eventually be able to trace your diamond right till the source. So, for example, in America, we've already piloted this program, and then we will move as we develop the tech. We will move further. It's called the Origins program. So it's an app that you have on your phone, which can then scan the unique identification number of the diamond, and it will tell you exactly which mine it has come from, what is the rarity index of that diamond, who has cut and polished it, who has graded it, and finally how it has reached you. So there is the entire pipeline that can be traced back. So that's something that we have piloted, and we look at hopefully expanding it further as and when the tech builds up.
So one of the other things that kept coming up in the questions that you have been kind enough to say you'll answer is the whole idea that natural diamonds are not rare. And this is one comment that came in. De Beers, with its monopoly over diamond mines, has created an artificial scarcity by inflating the prices. The lab diamond industry is now destroying that idea. So let's talk about this idea of diamonds being rare. Is it true that basically the whole market is controlled by a couple of businesses who then manage to hold on to supply in order to create a scarcity? What's the response to that?
So I am De Beers,
Yes.
and you can be, say, another mining company. I have 30% of the market.
Yes.
Remaining 70% of the market is
Not you.
mine.
Yes.
Now, any smart businessman will know that if I keep holding on to my supply, others are going to come and fill it. So if there is a demand, then I will also fill that demand. It's not as though there will be, I will try to build an artificial scarcity of the prices because holding. But I'm only 30% of the market. So how does that work?
There's an idea that there is cartelization among those 4 or 5 guys who control the whole market, that they together decide to hold on to the prices.
We are part of the GDPR. We are part of the European Union. Our head offices are in the UK. There is tremendous amount of regulation on monopolistic behavior. There are huge fines.
Yeah.
We are so there is no question of us collaborating or cartelizing the whole diamond supply. How it's not possible.
It's not possible. Yeah. Is lab-grown diamonds challenging the entire premise of natural diamonds?
So I'll build a bit of perspective here on lab-grown diamonds. So when we look at, say, for example, a natural diamond and a lab-grown diamond, there are large number of differences that consumers should be aware of. First of all, is that you can make out the difference. So if you put the lab-grown diamond in a machine, it will within seconds tell you that it is synthetic. So there is a very clear way for people to understand whether it is natural or lab-grown. It's not something that,
So the idea initially, there was this whole thing that it just simply cannot be detected is no longer true.
No,
you can easily detect.
You can easily detect within seconds because the growth pattern of natural diamonds and lab-grown diamonds are very different.
Yeah. I remember Tanishq was talking about a machine that they're putting in the stores.
In fact, Tanishq is rolling out diamond expertise centers across their stores to help build this confidence, because our objective is consumers should not be confused. They should be clear about what they're getting. So,
and you believe the natural diamonds will hold value in the face? Yeah. Okay.
In my opinion, natural. Okay, so point one is you
can tell the difference.
Yeah, you can tell that.
Fair enough.
Point two is natural diamonds are rare, inherently rare, because they come from Mother Earth. They are a miracle of nature. It is really, we are really fortunate to be able to access them. So the last mine that we have actually discovered, or the last diamond mine discovered, was 20 years ago. The peak of recovery of diamonds was in 2008. So the recovery from the mines also is depleting. It's not as though, it's an limitless supply. Whereas if you look at a lab-grown product, it is finally a technological product. It is made in a factory.
Hmm.
So the supply for that is constant. It is a endless supply, whereas natural diamonds are finally finite. Eventually, there will be none. And as you know, the rarer something becomes, the more valuable it will be, the more precious it will be. So that's the third difference. Fourth difference is the value they hold.
Okay.
So, natural diamonds, if you were to look at it over the past 20 years, the value has been growing at a steady 3%, 4% every year. So the natural diamond value in terms of price has stayed stable or steady. Whereas if you were to look at lab-grown diamond prices, they've crashed over the past 3 years. And now they are 10% of the value they were at 3 years ago. So you see the difference in a luxury product and a mass produced product. So that's the kind of differentiation.
I do want to ask you about the environmental cost of both.
Hmm.
Because nothing is free. So obviously mining, there's an environmental cost, and even creating a diamond in the lab, there's an environmental cost. Can you compare those two for me?
So I will give you an example. So for example, and I will know much more about De Beers.
Yes.
So I will give you so De Beers has a program called Building Forever. So the objective of that program, and it is taken extremely seriously, the objective of that program is to reap a positive impact on the communities that produce the diamonds long after the last diamond is mined. So the idea is that normally mines are found in arid, deserted areas. So there is absolutely no development there. The moment you start with a mine, the miners come in. So the moment the community starts going there, the miners with the families will come in, right? So as a result of which, there is always a secondary industry that pops up. So you will have schools, colleges, hospitals, shops, malls, theaters. So, and then you have tremendous amount of infrastructure being built over there. So as a result, around the mine, you will have a whole thriving community which starts. And De Beers encourages that and supports in building that community. The second part is when we mine, if we mine 1 hectare, we conserve 5 hectares. So De Beers actually has some of the largest wildlife reserves which they manage in partnership with the government and NGOs in Botswana, South Africa. So there is an entire diamond route which is a wildlife preserve because of the kind of work that is being done around that. We also look at building capability. So when we look at diversity and inclusion, we also ensure that women come into the workforce. In fact, there were in 2017, De Beers along with the UN had made a pledge that we will have 50% 50% women in senior management, and that has been reached. So these are things that we effectively take efforts to build on. So whilst we are working on this, there is also a third-party sustainability audit that is done on our business to ensure that whatever targets we are putting in for sustainability are actually being met. And this is third party. This is not us saying that, oh, we are sustainable. So those are things that we actually look at. When we look at lab-grown products, we have to first ask a few questions. One is to create the kind of energy that is at the center of the earth, the kind of pressure, the kind of heat. What is it that is being used? Whether it is renewable energy or non-renewable energy.
Yeah.
In India, when you look at it, 74% of our energy is non-renewable, what we use in India overall. So it is coal powered. So that is the question the consumer should ask, because if you believe that lab grown products are sustainable, then these are the questions you ask, because it is finally a factory which is creating that kind of pressure, that kind of heat to be able to create a diamond. So they need to ask that question. The second is it's easy to feel nice when you say that, I bought a sustainable diamond. So there is a lot of greenwashing that happens. So we have to ask the questions to understand truly whether the company is actually green or not. So those are the things that consumers should check on before they buy into any product.
Okay, so here's a completely different question, right? The idea that commitment and love has always been linked with diamonds. I have a producer, Aaron, who's about to propose, and it's going to cost him a lot of money. Is that your fault? Because there's the idea now that the whole idea was cooked up by De Beers to say that, oh, you have to propose with a diamond. It did not exist before that. It's a completely marketing, it's a marketing story. So, as the VP marketing of De Beers, is this your fault? Is it completely a marketing story that you have to propose with a diamond?
So actually, for marketers, the best place to actually get their ideas are consumers. That's when actual magic happens, and this is what consumers have told us, and we've just built it up. The first recorded instance of diamond engagement ring, it was actually in 1477 when the Archduke Maximilian of Austria presented the Mary of Burgundy a diamond ring to mark their betrothal. So that's when the actual diamond engagement ring was born. What we have actually done is built on that idea and made it more accessible to consumers.
When we go to a store to buy a diamond, they'll obviously tell us that, okay, this is what it costs. Diamond ka itna hai. How do we figure out whether that is, how do they arrive at that price of this is what the diamond will cost? Because we know what the going rate of gold is.
Yes.
And that becomes easier then to just mentally calculate, saying, okay, I'm buying these many tolas of gold and this is what it's going to cost me. But with diamonds, it's far more complex. So how is the pricing of diamonds justified?
So the pricing of diamonds is a bit complicated because you have to you have to see an intersection of all the four C's together. So one is on the carat. So the larger a diamond gets, the rarer it becomes. The second is on the clarity. So the less of the inclusions or less of the birthmarks, the clearer a diamond is, the more rare it becomes, the more valuable it becomes. Then it's on color. So color also, the whiter the diamond is, in the white range, the more expensive it gets. And last is the cut. Now this is the only thing that is actually driven by humans. This is based on your craftsmanship, whereas the rest of it is nature given.
Yeah.
So then based on the cut, the intersection or the juxtapositioning of these is actually what makes the price of the diamond. So there are indicators. Now, in fact, being online has really helped people to understand technically what would be the price range of the of say a certain 1 carat diamond of certain clarity and color. So you can get a benchmark, but it is always about the four C's that actually make the price of the diamond. Also, in terms of
So actually, bigger is not necessarily better when it comes to diamond.
not necessary, yeah, because you may have a really large stone in terms of weight wise, it is 1 carat.
Yeah.
But if it is cut badly, then it will not have the kind of brilliance or the sparkle that it will have. And it will be priced much lower because the value will not come out of that diamond. So it is not necessary that bigger is better.
What makes diamonds expensive?
I think the inherent value that these diamonds are finite is what really. So, like if anything that is rare. So, for example, when you talk about limited edition watches, limited edition bags, all of that, those are expensive because they are only so many in the market. So it is about the rarity and the finiteness of this product. And it is in fact a miracle of nature. This diamond here is close to 3 billion years old. So these diamonds are almost as old as Mother Earth.
Mm.
And when you think about it, they are almost equal to the beginning of time. So when you look at something of such great magic, such great miracle and value, then you really understand the kind of, you know, us being so fortunate to be able to actually have them on us. So that's the kind of value that a natural diamond has.
Can certificates, and we know that, one of the things to do as a customer when you're buying is to ask for that diamond certificate, right? Because honestly, we can't really tell about these 4 Cs. We just have to accept whatever the store gives us. Can those certificates be fudged?
For example, if you go to a well-renowned jeweler, someone you trust, and in India, there are two family people. One is the family doctor and the second is the family jeweler. So if the jeweler is someone you trust, then chances are that it won't be fudged. But there are many grading labs in the country who can actually verify what you've got. So, for example, there is the GIA, then there is our own De Beers Institute of Diamonds, there is IGI, and all of these laboratories actually certify jewelry or giving you the information on the diamond. And these are all independent labs. So it is not as though someone can fudge it. So if you suspect, then you can either go to Tanishq's Diamond Expertise Center, or you can always give your product to the lab and they can verify.
They can verify. So there's still an element of trust, and there's still an element of selection who you buy the diamond from.
Yes, of course. Because it is something that you are paying a lot of money for, and there is always someone that you will trust blindly when it comes to jewelry.
Also, when you talked about the fact that diamonds hold a certain amount of value and the price stays stable, that would also depend on resale value, the ability of the customer to go and sell that diamond back again, either to that jeweler, to a different jeweler. That tends to be a challenge. I mean, traditionally there's this view that if you buy plain gold with nothing in it, then it's much easier to extract that value in the future. What's your response to that? Why is resale of diamonds so complicated?
It's not complicated now. So it was at one point, but now it is not so complicated. So if you were to buy a product, a diamond jewelry from any jeweler now, if you go back to that jeweler, he will give you close to 90 or even 100% of the diamond's value. So it is not as though you can't exchange your diamond jewelry, or you can't exchange or upgrade your diamond jewelry, or even get a refund. So when we look at gold, the gold has a slightly more liquid option because it is tradable everywhere. But diamonds are not equal to gold. Diamonds are something completely different because each diamond is unique.
Right.
So every diamond has a unique fingerprint. So and it is as unique as a fingerprint. So this diamond will be very different from this diamond because it has unique identifying features. So they are not like apples to apples. So, but resale value of diamonds is not at all complicated in this country because you can go to the jeweler who you bought from and you can always exchange or upgrade.
What mistakes do customers normally make when buying diamonds?
Biggest mistake is they think that they can't buy diamonds. So many women have this mental block that diamonds are too expensive for me, which I think is something that they should experiment with first. Because now if you were to really look at it, diamond jewelry, and especially because of the Indian innovation and engineering techniques that our jewelry manufacturing sector has, diamond jewelry can be bought from rupees 5,000 onwards. So it is not something that is unaccessible or is unachievable. Everyone has the option to be able to buy natural diamonds. The second bit that I think they should look at is to, if a deal is too good to be true,
Hmm.
then most likely it is not. So they should be clear about where they are buying from, whether they are getting the right certification, and also not be fooled by just the size of the diamond. You should look at all the four C's, especially the cut,
Hmm.
because the cut is what really makes or breaks the brilliance and fire and sparkle of the diamond. So if the cut is good, it makes a huge difference, even if the diamond is smaller.
What trends are you noticing right now in jewelry in India?
So we ran a diamond acquisition study in recently, where we actually survey 9,000 women across the country on the diamonds that they had purchased. So when we looked at that, what we realized is about 58% of them want to wear the diamonds every day. It's not, and they bought for that purpose. It is not about just that one day on the whole 365 days that they want to wear and then put in the locker. They want diamonds that they can wear every day. So that's one big trend that we are seeing. The second part is about 52% of them purchased on impulse, which was very surprising for us too, because what we thought was diamond is a very considered purchase. But I think now with growing financial independence,
Yeah.
I think it is just something that women like to pick up. And the third and most encouraging thing that we found was that when we looked at the age groups of who had purchased the largest chunk of diamond jewelry, it is the Gen Zs. 51% of them had purchased natural diamonds in that year.
So the idea that Gen Z is going lab grown is not.
I don't.
You don't prescribe.
I
to
don't
that idea.
prescribe. See, because this is a market that is booming.
Hmm.
And premiumization is something that everyone is looking at, including us. So when we are looking at that, and Gen Z is very smart, they have access to a lot of information. They know what things hold value, what things endure in terms of they have meaning, and they endure in terms of the long term. And they are seeing that. And that's how they're looking at natural diamonds.
Could you tell us the history of De Beers as a company? How old is it? When did it start off?
De Beers started in 1888. We are about 100 and almost 140 years old. We recently launched a book which talks about our iconic line, "A Diamond is Forever." That that's 100 years old now, and because that's when we really started marketing and advertising for diamonds.
So De Beers started marketing diamonds 100 years ago.
Yes.
Okay. And has it always been the engagement ring market, or?
Yes. So the whole premise of a diamond is forever, whilst it was attached to the emotion that when you're committing for marriage, it is something that you're looking at to do forever. And that is how the whole tagline. So in fact, there's a very interesting story. So NWIR was the agency that was De Beers' advertising agency. And the copywriter, Frances Gerety, had to make a presentation for De Beers the very next day. And she had nothing. And in the middle of the night, she just got this idea and she wrote "A Diamond is Forever." And that's what she pitched the next morning. And that's how history was made. So this happened in 1947. And the why it is so relevant is also because of the properties a diamond has. Diamonds born when the earth was born, and it will continue long after we as humans are gone. It's not only about the fact that it is about love and emotion, it is also about the inherent quality that diamonds have, which is scientific fact.
That's a lovely story. Taraj, thank you so much for answering all of these questions today and being in the hot seat and taking all of the questions. Well played. And if, of course, our audience has more questions for you, we'll send you another list.
Sure, anytime. We are very happy to ensure that whatever consumers have as confusion, to clear that. So that's our objective.
All right, so that's the offer. If you have more questions about either De Beers or about diamonds in general, put it in the comment section, and we'll convince Taranj and the team at De Beers to come back and answer more questions
Anytime.
anytime. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. All the best. Thank you.